This may be long, but honestly, I'm looking for some answers. So I've pushed this off for the last few years, not thinking much of it. And it just kind of hit me about a week ago, and I can't stop thinking about it now. 6 years ago, my boyfriend at the time, husband now, woke me up sweating and vibrating, in absolute fear. I asked him what was wrong, and he began stuttering and telling me I would never believe him. He went on to tell me that he was woken up around midnight to this person standing at the end of the bed. Yes, my first thought was sleep paralysis as well. But he sat up and was ready to attack if he needed to. And in his head, he heard a voice that wasn't his, telling him it was okay and that they weren't there for any ill reason. He said he felt immediately calm from that. He also noted he was shocked with how light of a sleeper I am, that his movements didn't wake me. This being was unnaturally tall and actually had to crouch a little due to its height and us having being asleep in my basement. He said that this being reached out for a greeting and again began hearing a voice in his head saying, "Hello." Nothing much else happened that night as my husband was frightened. All he remembered at that time was the last thing he heard from it in his mind, and that was, "I'll see you again soon." And then, he said it felt like as if time had started again, not realizing that it had ever felt like it stopped until that point, and he was back in reality. That's when he woke me, feeling it had only been about 10 to 15 minutes when it had actually been over an hour. These visits continued for months, minimum of once a week, max 3 to 4 times, but my husband got less and less frightened each time. This thing and him built a sort of friendship from what he explained to me. It had a name, but for the life of me I can't remember what he said it was. It answered any and every question my husband had, and I won't mention what those were here. But after a while it just stopped. He stopped waking me up in the middle of the night or telling me about that the next morning. But the times were always the same. He said he would be awoken around midnight and that they would have discussions about literally anything my husband had curiosities about. And he would come back to reality and time would unfreeze again between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m., having only felt like the encounter had lasted a short period of time. Once it stopped, I can't iterate just how much I mean it stopped. It was like for him it never happened. It's been 6 years, so I know this is choppy, but it's hard to remember everything with it having been so long ago now. I forgot about it for so long, and I don't know what prompted me to remember it about a week ago. But now I can't stop thinking about it and the oddness of it, and just how it just stopped so suddenly. And he's literally never made mention of it ever again. And I never brought it back up to him the last week in fear that he may think I'm crazy. Which I don't know why that's my fear, but part of me thinks if there's a chance he's completely forgotten it, whether it be on his own or by something else, he may think I've gone insane. Anyways, this is long, so if you read the whole thing and have any ideas or similar stories, please let me know. I'm trying to figure this out now, and it's literally keeping me up at night. This happened a few months ago. So, I work as a nurse and started a new job 45 minutes away at a nursing home that pays well and has the shift I want. The shift I normally work is weekend doubles, evenings and overnights, a 16-hour shift a day. But they needed me to work morning and evening this particular weekend, and I agreed. The night shift nurse who came to relieve me was late Sunday night. I was behind on charting anyways, so I didn't get upset. I was giving report and heard a yelling resident on the floor. He was with it and said he'd fell. He was wearing warm socks that are not non-slip. He was sent to the ER due to his hip. More charting, state reportable if broken. Get out of work at 1 to 2 a.m., close to a 20-hour shift after a 17-hour shift the day before. I was dead on my feet, but I felt well enough to drive. The way I go home has a lot of twists and turns. I travel by the lake and love the water, so it helps me stay awake. I realize around here that I am not wearing my glasses, but I'm too lazy to turn around to go get them. I only wear them to work and drive, but take them off to chart. I forgot them a lot. I go past a small town with twists and turns and woods, listen to my book to keep awake. About halfway home now. At the next turn, there is a bright light like a spotlight coming through the woods. I continue on a little bit further, still in the wooden area and towards where the bright light is coming from. On the side of the road, where the night before I saw a hit deer, there was what looked to be a very thin man. Skin-tight, black clothes kneeling over the deer that is still there, his back towards me. I thought he looked weird, but my glasses were gone and my eyes started to blur a little bit. The spotlight was coming from the woods, pointing towards the man. I remember thinking about the light, thinking about how they got their vehicle through the woods, but again, I was just dead. I tried to pause my book and to slow down my car to nearly a stop. The man starts to move from the deer. I roll down my window and ask, "Is everything okay? Do you need any help?" Not really looking at him. I thought that maybe it was a different deer that he had hit. I am about 15 or 20 or so feet in front of them. My car is stopped at this point, and I'm still trying to get my book to stop. My touchscreen radio isn't working well, so I pick up my phone and stop the book that way. I really look towards the man after looking away from my phone, finally getting my book to stop, and realize that he or she really isn't a human. I freeze. It has stood up and faced me now. The head is huge, like they described aliens to be, with huge eyes, except this one is tall, not a tiny thing like they show on TV. It starts to walk towards my car, and I can't breathe. I can't move. I felt like I couldn't even think. Everything just felt like it froze. I heard a voice, not mine, that sounded like it was in my head say, "Sleep." I blink. It's gone, along with the deer. I look at my clock, and it's almost 4 a.m. My car is now in park, and I'm pulled over with no memory of doing so. My window is still down. I look at my phone, which is still in my hand, open it, and my book is still stopped in the same place. I try to call my sister, but she wouldn't answer, so I call my job instead. They do answer, and I just ask about my glasses and the resident. I eventually tell her I fell asleep and wanted to talk to someone so it doesn't happen again, and everyone else is asleep. So she stayed on the phone till I got home. I really don't think I fell asleep, but I pretend I did so I don't go insane. I haven't told anyone this. It scares me just thinking about it. If I did fall asleep, I could have hurt someone. If I didn't, then what? This was a personal experience that happened over a year ago, and it's been a mystery to me ever since. Any information explaining what possibly could have happened would be greatly appreciated. This is in NSW, Australia. I was at my aunt's holiday house in for the weekend. It was just a regular night. A little bit wet, but everything was normal. So it was around 11:40 p.m., and my dog was sleeping on my bed. Then he quickly got up and started barking his head off to go outside, so I let him. This is unusual behavior for my dog. He runs through the other side of the backyard, which is about 15 meters away from the porch, and then stops barking. He was silent. I turned around for 2 seconds to look at my mom, who had just come out to see what was going on. I turned back around and my dog was just sitting on the front porch, looking at me like nothing happened. I don't know how he ran back so fast without me noticing, but anyway, here's the interesting bit. Me and my mom hear this loud buzzing sound, not like an electric sparking sound, nothing natural like we had ever heard before, and a bright lime green light came shining directly down, lighting up the whole backyard perfectly, like a precise laser scan. And it happened twice. Shining and buzzing, there was a pause, and then more shining and buzzing. There was a roof over the back porch, so I couldn't look up to see where it had come from. My instant thought was aliens. The whole thing was so bizarre, like nothing I had ever heard or seen before. It started as a deep buzz to a higher pitched buzz and back to a deep buzz, with the green light as the buzzing was happening, and then the whole thing just stopped. Then my dog slowly crept inside and went back up onto my bed and was whimpering. The light couldn't have been from a power line because there would have been a shadow casting from the roof of the house, and sparks don't give off green light anyway, especially not as bright and neon as the one I saw. Can someone please respond and explain? I will never forget. Summer before 7th grade, sometime in July. It was a Wednesday night, maybe early Thursday morning. The evening before, my family had watched the old school show Unsolved Mysteries. I awoke in the night, lying on my right side, awake, but my eyes still shut, completely silent. None of us ran fans back then to aid in sleep. I was awake and basically waiting to fall asleep again. However, I decided to open my eyes. On the right side of my bed, right there, was a being, seemingly fixated on a plush bear that I had kept in the bed with me. And this being fit all of the descriptions I'd ever heard about or watched on television. Shorter, pale gray skin, and those awful eyes, huge, black, and slanted, staring at my bear right by my bed. Honestly, I couldn't put into words how I felt right at that moment. I was only just about 12 at that time. At some point, I pulled my covers over my head and felt an awful rushing through my body of super warm, then cool, and then warm again. Only later in my life did I understand that I was most likely feeling shock. I couldn't scream. I felt frozen. Too scared to scream, maybe? What if I did scream? My mother and stepfather and 2 brothers would hear me. What the heck would they do if they came into the room and saw this thing? What would it do? Is it going to kill me? Abduct me? What if it already had and they're just returning me? All of these thoughts, plus a million more, just racing through my young mind. Ugh, awful just recounting all of it and writing it here. Again, how could I ever forget something traumatic like this? So being such a brave 11-year-old, and after what felt like 12 hours, I decided to try and scare it. I decided I would thrash my legs up and down from under my covers as hard as I could. I know, horrifying. I was so petrified though, so I did this and remained under my covers just waiting. Nothing happened. So I stayed under the covers. This had to be at least close to going on 2 hours from when I first opened my eyes and saw this thing. As I laid wide awake, I heard a noise. To this day, I still cannot explain exactly how it sounded. The sound felt as if it surrounded me and was coming from outside. It was a crisp, clean sounding sound. Maybe mechanical, but maybe not, lasting only about 2 seconds. A sound that I definitely had never heard before and definitely have not heard since. As soon as I heard this sound, something in my mind told me, oh, they're gone. As crazy as it sounds, I firmly believe the sound was their transportation leaving. Needless to say, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night or early morning. It took me so long to confide in my family about this terribly scary incident. Of course, they didn't believe me. However, now, from time to time, my mother will mention it and suggest that maybe that's why I suffer from insomnia now. Very well could be. This is my first post here in Reddit. Feel free to share any thoughts. Also my first time sharing this story publicly. It would be reassuring to hear any other stories or similar happenings. My aunt has this crazy story of this time she saw a UFO right above her house, and it had a glow with a sort of breathing and vibration effect that she said you could feel heavily. She went and took pictures, and in the pictures the UFO still had the glowing and breathing effect. She sent it to her friends and family, and people were freaking out. A couple of days later, though, the UFO in the picture is 100% gone from everyone's phone. I've struggled with the idea of sharing my experience, mostly because I don't know if it actually happened or if it was just a dream. One night, in the summer, when I was about 10 or 11, I was awake in the middle of the night and I could hear the horses running around the pasture as if something had happened. I decided to get up and go check on things. At that time, my family had a massive old barn and we lived in the middle of nowhere. I walked through the door of the barn and found a very large man, as white as snow, climbing into the hayloft. I remember being startled but not scared. He turned around and looked at me and slowly lowered himself back down. He took a few steps towards me before he knelt down and put out his hand, like one would do with a stray animal. As I looked at him, I felt like he looked sad and tired, and not at all like he was going to do me any harm. I decided to take his hand and walk him towards our kids' hangout space. which was just a space in the barn where we had some old couches, a few toys, and a radio. As soon as he saw the radio, he became more animated, ran towards it, and started messing around with it. That went on for a bit, and I kept asking him what he needed the radio for. He never said a word, not one word. He wouldn't give me a name, so I started calling him Radio. After some time, he set the radio down and sat down on the couch. I brought over my favorite horse book and started thumbing through the pages, showing him all of my favorite horse breeds. Eventually, he gently took the book from me and closed it as if to say, "I'm done." I got up to put the book away, and he laid down on the couch. I remember him being so large that his head was on the armrest, while his legs hung over the other armrest, at the knee. He was pure white, and I don't recall any hair. His eyes were jet black, but they weren't huge or angular. If anything, they slanted downward and were beady. After he fell asleep, I decided to go back in the house and go to bed, but I put a blanket over him before I went back in. I woke up in the morning, and the whole experience came flooding back to me. My feet were dirty as if I had been outside during the night. I grabbed some snacks and ran out to the barn. I ran to our hangout space and found everything as I would have expected it. The blanket was on the floor, the book was sitting on the table, and the radio was out of place. But he was gone. It's important to know that I had a habit of sleepwalking at this time in my life, so it's very possible that this was all just a dream. At first, I thought he was just a very, very, very strange person, and I hoped he found safety. The memory never left me, and by the time I was a teen, I had decided that I dreamed the whole thing and let it go. Then, Prometheus came out, and I agreed to go see it with friends. When the tall white alien came on screen, I nearly jumped out of my seat. It wasn't an exact likeness, but it was like seeing a ghost. At the time, I knew absolutely nothing about aliens, and the only one I had ever heard of was the classic little green men. Nonetheless, I forced myself to let it go and moved on. As time passed, I started wondering how I could imagine a being that I've never heard of. Could that really have happened? Could radio be real? This happened to me back in 2013. I was 18 at the time. I was a healthy, normal woman by all accounts and lived in a suburb of South Florida. Just at that juncture in my life, I was moving up north to U of F, which is in Gainesville. Aside from the university, it's a very boring town. Mostly nothing up there. I had noticed that before moving there, and during my time there, once a month, always on the same night, I think the first Sunday of every month actually, I wouldn't be able to sleep. Without fail, I couldn't sleep and I would toss and turn all night. Sometimes after those nights, I would wake up with something strange on my body. Once, on my lower spine, right on the cord, I woke with a large red bump, perfectly centered. It wasn't itchy like a bug bite, and it was unlike a pimple. Another time, I awoke with a scar across my lower abdomen. It was long and unlike a scratch. It was brown, like a cauterized scar. But it left my body within a day or two like a scratch might have. On one such Sunday, my boyfriend happened to be spending the night. It was my parents' rule that he would sleep in a separate bedroom, but before he went off to his room, he laid next to me in my bed for a little while we talked. He was saying something when suddenly he went quiet and looked behind him. I asked what was the matter, but he shrugged it off. He went to his room and we both tried to sleep. However, like usual on these nights, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. A feeling of dread prevented me from sleeping. I got restless and decided to go sleep in the room with my boyfriend, hoping I might be able to relax with him there. But still I couldn't sleep, nearly dozing off only to wake in a fright, which was so uncharacteristic. I gave up and went back to my own room until I suddenly gave in and fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I told my boyfriend that I couldn't sleep all night. I felt like something was coming to get me. He told me, at that moment, the previous night when he had suddenly fell silent mid-conversation, he thought he saw something outside of my window. He said for whatever reason, the first thing that came to his mind was aliens, and it froze him in fear. He also told me that shortly after I had returned to my room in the middle of the night, he was disturbed by a loud static noise and felt vibrations in the air. After a few months, those routine once-a-month sleepless nights stopped and never returned. I still don't know what it was all about, or if it was even anything at all, but that night put us both on edge. My boyfriend and I had been planning a camping trip in Canton, Oklahoma for October 27th and 28th of 2018. We got to our campsite late in the afternoon and started to set up like usual. Unload the truck, set up the tent, set up our chairs around the fire pit ring, and pile the firewood up. I was really excited for the fire later because we had brought a huge log that had one of those holes through the center and soaked with some sort of long burning solution. We got all of our comfy stuff tossed in the tent. We set up our lights and speaker, hung out around the fire ring, listened to music, and talked until the sun went down. Then, my boyfriend started a fire with the single giant log I was so excited about. As we were sitting in front of the fire, the sun completely down at this point, the speaker started to mess up. It was a weird, loud, glitchy static that happened several times, which I had never heard it do before. We figured that maybe it was because the internet was spotty, or maybe the speaker was too far from the phone it was connected to. So my boyfriend went to check it out on more than one occasion and couldn't figure out what the problem might be, because we only had okay cell service. It started to creep me out, and maybe him as well, but he never said a thing even if it did. To change it up, we decided to just leave it alone and ignore the glitchy static and go open the Fritos and bean dip we brought and crack some glow sticks at the table. This is where everything ended. I dipped 1 to 2 Fritos in the bean dip, opened a pack of glow sticks, and sitting across from me at the picnic table, my boyfriend opened one of the glow stick packs that you make into glasses. He put the connector piece in his nose like it was an oxygen tube. I remember it so clearly. I remember laughing really hard and saying, "Oh my God, get those out of your nose." And the very next thing I remember was waking up in the tent. I was in a sleeping bag, nearly all the way zipped up, and my boyfriend next to me asking if I'd unzip the sleeping bag and share it with him because he was freezing. And then, that's when we both sort of snapped out of a sleepy daze and looked at each other so unbelievably confused, and honestly really, really scared. So we sat there confused and sort of lost for words. So I said, "What the hell happened? Why are we in here? How? What the fuck?" I didn't know what to say or think, and my boyfriend looked just as confused and scared. He shook his head in confusion, and it was all over his face too, just shock and scared. Then he said, "I don't know. I have no idea what the hell happened. I just woke up a few seconds before you. I was just lying here flat on my back, no pillows, blankets, nothing." Which for him is weird because he sleeps with millions of pillows. We sat there and talked through what all we had done and what we remembered. We remember the very exact same moment of him putting the connector on his nose like a breathing tube and laughing our asses off. I was really freaked out and kind of hesitant to leave the tent. I've never in my life felt so confused. So we laid back down and he wrapped his arms around me, and we kept going over what had happened and how it was so weird that it didn't feel like we'd been sleeping on the ground all night. It's pretty typical to wake up from a night in a tent feeling a little achy. So after a while of talking and nothing making sense, I was ready to finally leave the tent. So I start looking around for my jeans and couldn't find them. So I said, "Where the hell are my jeans?" This is not unusual for me to only sleep in a t-shirt, but it didn't explain where they were. And all of a sudden, I had a really scary flash of the night that I could clearly remember. I was sitting at the picnic table while he was squatted in front of me, and I was panicked and crying hard and really scared. I was pulling giant stickers and thorn things from my jeans, and in this memory, my boyfriend was trying to calm me down and comfort me and saying, "It's okay, babe. You gotta grab them just like this." This very clear memory was like a slap in the face. It had to have been no more than a 15-second memory. So I tried to explain what just came to me to my boyfriend, and he said, "I don't remember that at all. Maybe it was a dream?" It made me a little irritated because it was so clear, and I knew for sure that it had happened. So he said he'd run out to the truck to grab my bag with the clothes in it. I looked out of the tent door flap and saw my shoes side by side set there, nice, not flung, to the side like I normally would do. But when I looked at my shoes, my right shoe's laces were covered in those giant thorn sticker things. So I yelled, "Babe, it did happen. It wasn't a dream." And I said again exactly what he said in my memory, and it came back to him too. He remembered exactly and clearly. When he came back to the tent, he had already looked even more freaked out and said, "Your jeans were folded nicely on your seat in the truck. You really need to come out here." So I got dressed and stepped out of the tent, and the first thing I noticed is everything was left exactly the same as I remembered it on the picnic table. There was a single Frito in the bean dip, the pile of glow sticks I never broke, still in place, and the pack my boyfriend opened with the little plastic connector piece he had put in his nose right on the table with the other parts. All of our firewood was burned. We had a lot of wood. It was really silent that morning. We walked to the bathroom, and in doing so, we noticed again that all of the surrounding lawns were beautifully manicured. So, where did the stickers come from? What the hell happened? How is this even possible? One thing my boyfriend noticed that was not normal for him was that he had no pain when he woke up. He was an 82nd Airborne Infantry paratrooper and wakes up with leg and back pain daily. So I guess that's the silver lining. Were we abducted? Running from something? Why can't we remember anything? We both believe in alien life, but aren't sure if this is what we think it is. Thoughts? I've always been so afraid of the dark, and even more so now, and I will never tent camp again. Neither of us have had any other memories come back to us, and I almost wonder if it's better that way. I'm not looking for answers, I just thought I'd finally share this here.